I'm going to be reading this article in the New Yorker, specifically this article in the New Yorker, how Joe Biden handed the presidency to Donald Trump, which I will admit, the title I agree with. I agree with the title 100%. I will say, though, this article is perhaps 3 years late. President Joe Biden got out of bed the day after the 2024 election, convinced that he had been wronged. The elites, the Democratic officials, the media, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, they shouldn't have pushed him out of the race. If he had stayed in, he would have beaten Donald Trump. That's what the polls suggested. He would say again and again. I don't know what polls these refer to, because I remember when he did drop out and how those polls were looking. So perhaps these are different polls, but I don't pretend like I know every poll. Not true. He would have lost, probably even worse, especially after another bad debate performance, which is what he would have done. Like, if Joe Biden did not want to drop out of the race, and I said this at the time, if Joe Biden wanted to salvage his chances after his debate performance, which was terrible. People try to minimize it now because we're far away from it, but it was disqualifying. It would be very hard to watch that and not think otherwise in the moment. And the people who have convinced themselves otherwise have had to do so, by nature of their own biases coming back into effect after being like shocked into what happened. It was disqualifying when you watched it, for sure, for sure. And to pretend otherwise is just a little too cynical, I think, for the average American, even for the average American. But I do think he should have stayed in, considering they lost anyway. It would have been funnier, for sure. His pollsters told us that no such polls existed. Okay, damn, I gotta stop stopping after every sentence and just read a little bit longer. Maybe I'm just an impatient person. There was no credible data, they said, to support the notion that he would have won. All unspun information suggested it would have been a loss, likely a spectacular one, far worse than that suffered by his replacement as the Democratic nominee, Vice President Kamala Harris. Like, yeah, come on. I don't need a poll to tell me that. Because if it hadn't been that way, honestly, I would just think worse of Americans. Like, I would be like, wow. Because generally speaking, it wouldn't necessarily mean worse. Like, I think we can all admit that the president in many ways is a figurehead for the larger party, but that's not really what the average American is sold by either party at times when they want you to focus on like voting for president. They emphasize like the unique qualifications of the person, like Hillary Clinton, or like how good of an orator they are. Like they individualize. That's what our society is like. So to like, have people vote for Joe Biden the way he is would make me not think worse of Americans in terms of like, rather than they vote for Donald Trump, but I would think poorly of Americans for just like not caring or being in that position to begin with. Like, it would just be really bad. The disconnect between Biden's optimism and the unhappy reality of poll results was a constant throughout his administration. Many insiders sensed that his inner circle shielded him from bad news. It's also true that for Biden to absorb those poll results, he would have had to face the biggest issue driving them. The public had concluded, long before most Democratic officials, media, and other elites had, that he was far too old to do the job. We got so screwed by Biden as a party, David Plouffe, who helped run the Harris campaign, told us. Plouffe had served as Senator Barack Obama's presidential campaign manager in 2008, and as a senior advisor to President Obama before largely retiring from politics in 2013. After Biden dropped out of the race on July 21st, 2024, Plouffe was drafted to help Harris in what he saw as a rescue mission. Harris, he said, was a great soldier, but the compressed 107-day race was a fucking nightmare. Yeah, I mean, and that's why I try to emphasize too, like, I don't think that it was a reasonable expectation that she could win, given all of the baggage on her from the Democratic Party in Biden, within the boundaries of what was likely going to happen and what she was likely, not just as a personal person with her own politics to do, but what the Democratic Party would have allowed her to do. So it really is just like, it was kind of dead on arrival. And it's all Biden, Plouffe said. By deciding to run for re-election, I'm sorry, but like, the New Yorker is so pretentious. Like, they have umlauts over everything. They have like accent graves over everything. They really like over grammar, over punctuation they're writing. There's no sentence in here that could be shorter, that isn't elongated with like M dashes or colons or semicolons or commas, just to demonstrate that they have like some really sophisticated editors who really know how grammar works. I'm sorry, it's very like funny to read. You're like, damn, do you really need it to be this way? It's a very specific style of writing. The real issue wasn't his age per se. It was the clear limitations of his abilities, which got worse throughout his presidency. What the public saw of his functioning was concerning. What was going on in private was worse. And we barely saw him too. That's the other thing. Like compared to Donald Trump, who we see all the time, it felt like Joe Biden was barely around for sure. And when you would say that, people would act like you were going crazy, but it was just true. While Biden on a day in, day out basis could certainly make decisions and assert wisdom and act as president, there were significant issues that complicated his presidency. A limit to the hours in which he could reliably function, and an increasing number of moments when he seemed to freeze up, lose his train of thought, forget the names of top aides, or momentarily not remember friends he'd known for decades. I guess, I mean, I feel like the first part of this thing, which is one long sentence again, kind of counters the second part, which is that like, if all this part that's happening after the colon is true, like there's just like random moments where you can't rely on him, where he can't remember things that you need him to remember, then the first part can't be true, right? Like that he can't make decisions and assert wisdom and act as president on a day in, day out basis, because you don't really know when you're getting like rational Biden and when you're getting like unrational Biden. And you can't always just discern by nature of how the information is being delivered to you that someone is making like bad decisions as a result of their like psychological problems, is what I mean. It's like, it's easy to point to the moments where he's like not lucid, or he's freezing up, or he's stumbling over his words as being moments where he's not like, he's incapacitated. But those things aren't, I mean, like mental decline is not limited to those things. Like the decisions he made could have also been impacted by his own mental decline, but I'm being picky. Not to mention impairments to his ability to communicate, ones unrelated to his lifelong stutter. Like, yeah, okay. It wasn't a straight line of decline. He had good days and bad. I guess that was two sentences. See, like I'm being overly critical. I shouldn't be. My grammar is terrible. My punctuation is terrible. I shouldn't critique people who are like, technically perfect just because I find it to be a little like, not pretentious because they are the New Yorker, but a little annoying. But until the last day of his presidency, Biden and those closest to him refused to admit the reality that his energy, cognitive skills, and communication capacity had faltered considerably. Even worse, through various means, they tried to hide it. And then came the June 27th debate against Trump, when Biden's decline was laid bare before the world. Again, though, I can't just blame the people around him, because it's not the people, like Biden's staff are Biden's staff, right? Like, to be members of Biden's staff, you probably need to be able to hide his decline. Like, that's their job. Their job is to run interference for their boss who hired them. Like, that is more understandable than what happened with like the aligned liberal media apparatus that tried to shout everyone else down, whose job it is not to, or at least whose job it is literally not, because there are some people whose job, like Joe Biden has handlers. That's their job. It's their job to make sure he gets from point A to point B. Like, the media and the people who are outside of those positions are the ones who like actively failed in their duties and their roles. Like the staff, yeah, like they're, craven, cowardly, like cynical careerists. But yeah, I know they work in like politics. They work in American politics. Of course they are. Like, it's the Jake Tappers out there who could see what was going on and chose to like maybe gaslight themselves, but certainly gaslight everyone else about it. Because I mean, because I was able to tell just from like a few clips, right? Like, maybe I was quick to jump to conclusions, but it seemed obvious to me. Even worse, through very blah, blah, blah. And then came the June 27th debate against Trump when Biden's decline was laid bare before the world. It really was. That was where they failed. That was the big failure. But again, they weren't doing a good job hiding it before. So maybe they just thought that everyone in the media who was just like gaslighting themselves, because you gotta understand, a lot of times the Democratic Party does very little work to actually gaslight you. They rely on like people's own cognitive dissonance or like own aversion to cognitive dissonance to come into play and for them to gaslight themselves, right? Like you get that so much with people who support Democrats, where it's not even the Democrats who are lying really well to you. They fill in the blanks for themselves. Like the Democrats will tell you something like, yeah, so we're going to keep doing our genocide. And if you're lucky, maybe we can help do some pro-trans stuff, maybe. And people will in their heads go like, Democrats are saying that if I don't vote for them, then like they're not going to do trans stuff, and like the genocide will get even worse. Like that's not what they said. That's not what they said. They said they're going to keep doing one and they might do the other, and you're just hoping that those things are like inverted, because like that would mean it would be more attractive to vote for them. Sorry, I'm getting off topic. I'm getting off track. As a result, Democrats stumbled into the fall of 2024 with an untested nominee and growing public mistrust of a White House that had been gaslighting the American people. Well, again, Kamala had been tested. They didn't like her, so it was even worse than untested. They didn't want her. They knew they didn't want her from before. So it wasn't so much untested. It was like the testing came back negative and then you just did it anyway. It was an abomination. One prominent Democratic strategist who publicly defended Biden told us he stole the election from the Democratic Party. Like that's the problem, right? Like who publicly defended Biden. Like, I mean, that was your job, but I'm not going to have much sympathy for you now because I know that you'll just say whatever it takes to, climb the career ladder and then like complain about it after. But the one right that we all have is to complain. Like they can never take your right to complain away from you, even if you're the architect of your own complaints. He stole an election from the Democratic Party. He stole it from the American people. So I don't agree with that. The Democratic Party, Joe Biden is the Democratic Party, for better or worse, at least the establishment. In some ways, he's not the worst member when it comes to some things. He's not like the most corrupt member of the Democratic Party personally. He's no Hillary Clinton. I don't think the Democratic Party was in a good place regardless of Joe Biden. And certainly he was better in a lot of ways than Obama. But yeah, so the Democratic Party can't distance themselves from like his unpopularity, because a lot of that was them too. They didn't come out like Joe Biden wasn't like the only one who was pro-Israeli genocide. That was all of them. Most of them just wanted the plausible deniability of having like signed a letter that these things need to be investigated without actually doing much to push for it. Don't let them confuse you. Biden had framed his entire presidency as a pitched battle to prevent Trump from returning to the Oval Office, but by not relinquishing power and refusing to be honest with himself and the country about his decline, he guaranteed it. But again, excuse me if I sound like I'm making excuses for Joe Biden. I'm not a big Joe Biden person. And so you'll have to forgive me for like coming to his defense in this sense. Joe Biden is mentally impaired. He can't make decisions well, right? That's part of it. Like people keep treating it like it's like, oh, on and off thing. Like, oh, so like he, in his moments of lucidity, he should have stepped back. What if what if his brain damage just didn't allow that to happen, right? That's why the people around him needed to have more courage. This is why throwing him under the bus right now makes a little bit less sense, because if we can all agree that he is the way people have been saying he is for 5 years, some of these decisions just weren't made with the right frame of mind. So like we can be mad at him, but we should also save a lot of energy to be mad at the people who are around him, who are currently trying to do this to salvage their careers, despite the fact that they bear a large amount of responsibility for this. Because Joe Biden can't even talk half the time. So like, how could I expect him to be able to make like good decisions the other times? Like, the party propped up Joe Biden in 2020. Joe Biden was happy to accept that propping up, but but he couldn't have done it by himself, for sure. No. George Clooney first met Joe Biden, the top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in New York City after terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. But their first meaningful conversation came after the actor became a credible voice advocating against the genocide in Darfur. Fresh off winning the Best Supporting Actor Oscar for Syriana in 2006, Clooney began reading reports that government-aligned forces under Sudan's President Omar al-Bashir were killing innocent civilians in the Darfur region of the country. It felt like a calling. He sought to travel there with a national TV network, but conditions grew so dangerous that the journalist dropped out. George and his father, Nick, a former TV anchorman who was then 72, flew to southern Sudan in April 2006 and sneaked into Darfur with a camera crew. After battling 9 days of brutal heat, zero security, and rough nights in mud huts, the Clooneys returned to the U.S. in time for a rally organized by the Save Darfur Coalition on the National Mall, where other speakers included then Senator Barack Obama. A few months later, George Clooney testified before the UN Security Council, and the next year the Clooneys released their documentary, A Journey to Darfur. He skipped the Oscars in 2009 to meet with President Obama and Vice President Biden, delivering 250,000 signed Save Darfur postcards to them and pushing for a full-time envoy to the region. By the time the 2024 presidential race had begun, the actor had known Biden for decades and had known him well for 15 years. He had last seen Biden on December 4, 2022, when Clooney was in D.C. with his wife Amal to be celebrated at the Kennedy Center Honors. Biden looked older, sure, but in the East Room of the White House at the reception for the honorees, the president was playful and seemed cogent enough. "We see Amal Clooney's husband," the president said to laughter. Yes, he was reading from prepared remarks, but far be it from an actor to take issue with someone reciting lines. He mentors those historic kids from Parkland on their march in their lives against gun violence, Biden said, stumbling a bit. "I met with every one of those kids, and they really appreciate what you did, George. Not a joke." In February 2024, Clooney had thought the special counsel Robert Hur's report, which called Biden an elderly man with a poor memory, mean-spirited. And when Biden gave a rousing State of the Union address in March, Clooney thought, "Way to go, Mr. President." He had helped him get elected in 2020 and was happy to do so again. For the rematch in 2024, everyone involved with the campaign knew that beating Trump would be difficult and would require a record-breaking amount of money. The Hollywood mogul Jeffrey Katzenberg led the charge on that front. He had been helping the Democratic Party with resources, money, and connections since the early 80s when he was an executive at Paramount Pictures and a student of the leadership of the legendary businessman Lew Wasserman. He'd backed some members of Congress, but Katzenberg's first real foray into the world of big donor politics came when he and David Geffen flew to Arkansas in 1990 to meet a young governor named Bill Clinton. Since then, Katzenberg had become a top fundraiser for Democratic presidential candidates. I'm gonna tell you right now, this article to me should just be a list of the names of the people who worked around George Biden, Joe Biden, who were hiding these things. Not anonymous people who are frustrated with the trajectory of his campaign, because again, Joe Biden could not be responsible for himself because Joe Biden is an old, no offense, man with dementia. It's not something that you can really hold someone accountable for, even if we would like to in the way that we would want to. It's the people who enabled him around him. Like, even this little aside about George fucking Clooney, it's not George Clooney's job to investigate the mental health and psychological fitness of presidents. It's the people who wrote this fucking article, Jake Tapper's job to do that. And they abdicated that responsibility because they were afraid of the implications to that job, which is such a big problem in our political and critical media space, where it's so much more important for people to be able to say that they are a journalist as like their job than to practice journalism. The ability to like fill the space of the media is so much more important than being like actually like filling the role of a free press. That like when you complain about the New York Times and the way they report on things like Israel and Palestinian genocide, they will go like, well, when you complain about us, you weaken people's faith in the institution of free press, as though the way they report on things, the way they for example, the way Jake Tapper runs interference for Joe Biden isn't the real thing that's weakening the institution of the free press. And they try to like abdicate that responsibility onto their critics, right? To the people who are like, hey, when you do stuff like this, when you run interference for Joe Biden in a way that people can see and appreciate with their own eyes, that is not true. Like, you weaken people's opinion of the media. They just tell you that it's your fault for bringing it up, that it's so much more important to protect the illusion that we have a good free press than to actually have one, because that would empower like fascists without acknowledging, no, like it's the people who work there who are empowering fascists, not the people who criticize the terrible job that they do. But Yeah, it's a really frustrating dynamic to have where like you get from the critical media aligned to like liberals and like the left, or, the ostensible like public left that will do a bad job at being like a free press, but try to reference the liberal values of being a free press and tell you how important it is that we all pretend that's what they're doing, because if we don't pretend, it weakens them from like our theoretically our combined enemies of like the far right, as opposed to just them accepting responsibility. Like, no, like we're weakening the free press. Like you're doing it. Like, I'm just pointing out what you're doing. But yeah, okay, I'm gonna skip through all of this like fucking shit about them raising money, because I don't even agree that like they needed to raise that much money. They should have done good things instead. Like, money has a cost, which is what people who work in political media and in politics want to hide from you, is that like the more money is not the better, because sometimes the amount of money you take in from somebody costs you more in goodwill from people, and all they can try to do is try to convince you that money should have no cost. There should be no amount of money you can take from anybody that should make you think worse about me, because that makes me at a disadvantage from my like evil competitor. When it's just like, just don't take it, bro. Just don't take money from Cobra Commander. Just don't take money from like Skeletor. Just don't take money from like Hitler. Just like maybe like be satisfied with like $1 billion. Because like Democrats outrage Republicans all the time, and they just lose, especially at the presidential level. Okay. All this stuff about Katzenberg doesn't matter. Okay, so this is basically when they're setting up another fundraiser. Looks like, all these fucking umlauts, man. Okay. Okay, here we go. On Thursday, June 13th, Clooney landed at a private airfield in the Los Angeles area. On Saturday, he rolled to the Peacock Theater, capacity 7,100, roughly 4 hours before the event was set to begin. He and Roberts had hundreds of photographs to take with thousands of attendees, but whose perks depended on their contributions, from $250 to $500,000. Jesus Christ. If I had $500,000, I would not give it to the Democratic Party. Like, you couldn't convince me to. The event would once again set a record as the biggest fundraiser for a Democrat in American political history, raising more than $30 million, which they pissed away. They just pissed it away. Like an expensive multivitamin, they just pissed most of it away. Before Kimmel, Obama, and Biden hit the stage to toss bonds, I'm sorry, Jesus, just that lineup just took my breath away. Before Kimmel, Obama, and Biden hit the stage to toss bon mots back and forth in a cozy Q&A, there was a series of private reception called clutches, plus photo lines and free-flowing booze and hors d'oeuvres. Clooney and Roberts were doing the work of charming the attendees and posing for pictures when they heard the crowd starting to murmur. Clooney looked to the side and saw Obama walking in, grayer but still spry and electric. A few minutes later, Secret Service agents entered the room and announced that President Biden had arrived. Biden hobbled out from around the corner. That's rude. That's a little rude. You can just say like Biden came from around the corner, moving in a way that demonstrated his age. You don't got like hobbled. Clooney knew that the president had just arrived from the G7 Leaders Summit in Apulia, Italy that morning, and might be tired, but holy shit, he wasn't expecting this. I think they think it's cute at the New Yorker when they like intersperse stuff like this, like holy shit, into like their incredibly like overwritten like prose. Like, it gives it a little bit more personality, but I don't know. I'm very critical of the New Yorker. Since I heard that they only hire people from like Ivy League schools, I'm very critical of them. And only certain Ivies I heard too, but that's a rumor, so don't hold me to that. The president appeared severely diminished, as if he had aged a decade since Clooney last saw him in December 2022. He was taking tiny steps, and an aide seemed to be guiding him by the arm. It was like watching someone who was not alive. Again, that's a little rude. A Hollywood VIP recalled, "It was startling, and we all looked at each other. It was so awful." "Thank you for being here," the president said to guests as he shuffled past them. "Thank you for being here. Clooney felt a knot form in his stomach as the president approached him. Biden looked at him. "Thank you for being here," he said. "Thank you for being here." "You know, George," the assistant aide told the president gently. Oh, sorry. "You know, George." Sorry, I didn't get the intonation right there. "You know, George," the assistant aide told the president, gently reminding him of who was in front of him. "Yeah, I mean, come on, it's George Clooney." Like when George Clooney first spoke out about this, like people were, mad ass turbo libs were like, "Who's George Clooney anyway? Who is he to say anything about the president?" It's just like, but not being able to recognize George Clooney and being an American who is like over a certain, I guess between a certain age. Like, I don't know if kids know who George Clooney is. Like, I don't know if I show like a 10-year-old, but like, I could see, I would have to be, there is no amount of sick or tired I could be at my age that if I saw George Clooney in front of me, I wouldn't be like, "Holy shit, that's George Clooney." And I understand that, like, Biden's probably more jaded when it comes to meeting celebrities than I am, but George Clooney is a very specific looking person. He looks like George fucking Clooney. Like, so to not recognize him is just a sign of advanced deterioration. It's wild. It's wild. "Hi, Mr. President," Clooney said. "How are you?" the president replied. "How was your trip?" Clooney asked. "It was fine," the president said. It seemed clear that the president had not recognized Clooney. "It was not okay," recalled the Hollywood VIP who had witnessed this moment. "That thing, the moment where you recognize someone you know, especially a famous person who's doing a fucking fundraiser for you, it was delayed. It was uncomfortable." George Clooney, the aide clarified for president. "Oh, yeah," Biden said. "Hi, George." Clooney was shaken to his core. The president hadn't recognized him, a man he had known for years. He could say George Clooney. He didn't recognize George Clooney. Clooney had expressed concern about Biden's health before. A White House aide had told him a few months before that they were working on getting the president to take longer steps when he walked. But obviously the problem went far beyond his gait. This was much graver. This was the president of the United States of America. I'm sorry, I added that "of America" part. Clooney was certainly not the only one concerned. Other high-dollar attendees who posed for photographs with Obama and Biden described Biden as slow and almost catatonic, though they saw pockets of clarity while watching him on television and on stage later that night. There were obvious brain freezes and clear signs of a mental slide. It was, to some of them, terrifying. Obama didn't know what to make of how his former running mate was acting. At one point, in a small group of a few dozen top donors, Biden began speaking barely audibly and trailed off incoherently. Obama had to jump in and preside. The other moments during photos, Obama would hop in and finish sentences for him. "What do you mean Obama didn't know what to make of this?" Sounds like Obama knew exactly what to make of it. He knew he had to run interference for Joe because Joe was fucking up his legacy. Like, it wasn't confusion on Obama's point. Obama's smart. Obama got this immediately, obviously. Like, Obama knows Joe Biden. Like, everyone has to pretend. We're all pretending. But pretending like this, for stuff like this, it makes, there are so many negative consequences of it. It allows Republicans to be the first ones who are seen as speaking truth to a situation that is being hidden by the Democrats and their aligned media. It makes everyone who engages with this kind of like flawed logic to believe Joe Biden was okay and that you couldn't determine how he was based on how you were taking in his actions. It makes them more credulous and dumber overall. It lowers, it atrophies people's confidence in their ability to determine reality. It's a mess. It's a real mess. As Obama's former chief speechwriter John Favreau, not that one, his wife Emily pulled up to the event. Favreau didn't know which Joe Biden was going to show up that night. Although I will say, the pod boys, I feel like, were some of the first people to say they should jettison Biden, not before he had the bad debate performance, mind you, back when there would have been more time, but like certainly after they did come out and say that you should jettison him. Although, again, a lot of that was a little late, but I mean, first rats off a sinking ship have to get at least a little bit of, praise, I suppose. He'd had 2 personal meetings with Biden in the previous 2 years and 2 wildly divergent experiences. We're not going to read about the Favreau boys. It's kind of the same stuff. Like that night to Favreau, Biden seemed to have aged 50 years and 16 months. He was incoherent. His stories were meandering and confusing. Something about Iraq. What exactly was the point of this? He told one story twice. After the president left the group, Favreau asked a staffer about his demeanor. Oh, no, big deal. The staffer said the president must have been tired. It was nighttime at the end of a long week. Let's see. Some attendees later expressed concern about how Biden seemed on stage. The event was just half an hour or so, and the questions were friendly. Many in the audience were surprised by the president's apparent diminishment, his quiet and frail presentation, his inability to develop a strong, convincing sales pitch. Some of his answers were downright confusing. I mean, I will say, and perhaps this is my fault for not reading this ahead of time, but like this is just rehashing a lot of stuff we already knew. Like, I guess this is some people's way of like starting to throw Joe Biden under the bus, but like we're not quite at full, he's not under all wheels yet is what I'm saying. Like they're just easing him under the bus. They're hobbling him towards the bus right now. I just don't accept that people didn't know. Like, I don't accept that, like, it was a mystery to as many people who pretend like it was a mystery to me, to you. I don't even accept that the rationale I've used, that a lot of people will trick themselves into believing things that are flattering to them or benefit them, is true for a lot of these people. I think they just, like, they fully understood the scenario and are very cynical about American politics and are careerists. And what we're seeing now is part of that. And you got to understand, like, a fully infirmed president is great for you if you're a staffer, because you basically get everything that you want. You get to push through a lot of stuff that you want. Like Joe Biden and Donald Trump are are platonic ideals for like a political party to have as president, with some flaws, similar flaws, like with Donald Trump being like a chaotic individual who will like bite you the same as he'll take the food out of your hand. And Joe Biden, by nature of his dementia, also being in similar situations. Like, besides that part, being like a checked out president is exactly what most political parties and oligarchs want. They just want a figurehead that will distract people from, the situations that are being put forth. So this just seems a lot about Clooney, like George Clooney, which is fine. I have recently watched From Dusk Till Dawn. So here's the debate. Okay. Another wedding guest who sat at Schumer's table recalled him saying, "If things go south at the debate, me, Barack, Nancy, and Hakeem have a plan B." Told, though Schumer would later deny this. So this isn't at the same fundraiser. This is at a different event they were at, but I skipped all that part because it was fluff. It was unnecessary. George Clooney had flown back to Italy and compartmentalized his encounter with the president at the LA fundraiser, chalking it up to the president's 81 spins around the sun and Biden's own long trip from Italy, even if the president had flown in on Air Force One. Like, see, I can forgive George Clooney for not wanting to believe his own eyes, because like George Clooney is just like, he's just an actor. He's just some guy. Like, he's like a good actor, but it's not his role to diagnose anybody or hold them really accountable. But then the debate confirmed all the fears that he'd shoved aside. Biden struggled to find the words he needed to communicate. He made guttural sounds. His slack-jawed expression suggested that he wasn't even aware that he was on camera for the entire 90 minutes. "Look," he said at one point, and then trailed off before concluding, "We finally beat Medicare." That debate was wild. Anyone who's trying to like redeem Joe Biden's ability to win the election is only able to do so because America's short-term memory is very, very short. Like, that debate being last year, and I guess it was late June, early July, is already a decade ago for a lot of people. But in the direct aftermath, you really saw people's actual like shock and awe at what was going on and being put in front of them. Thank you for the super chat, Brian Tallme. Shameful Secret time. I have never seen From Dusk Till Dawn. It's really good. It's a really good movie. So many governors, senators, members of Congress, fundraisers, and activists were now reaching out to Clooney. Okay, our politicians are fucking so goddamn stupid. I don't even know what to say. Like, why you reach out to fucking George Clooney? Do you need him to, like, are you going to Ocean's 14 this situation? You're going to break into the White House like George Clooney? Like, they're reaching out to George Clooney. I'm sure they reached out to other people, but it's like, what? Like, come on, man. Like, what a disaster. Biden needed to take himself off the ticket. I guess. I guess, yeah. The old we needed the old demented man to make a good decision because every other person around them is a fucking enabler who will trick themselves into believing the sky is red if it gets them an extra $5 from a super PAC. So like we need the person least capable of making the good decision to make that decision because everyone else is too busy looking at their fucking checkbook. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Senator Joe Manchin reached Clooney through a mutual acquaintance. He felt that Biden, his friends for decades, had lost the will to fight. He told Clooney that a number of Democratic senators he'd spoken to were planning to confront Biden to try to convince him to step aside. You should have done it before. Manchin personally hoped that they wouldn't until after the NATO summit that month. No need to show our ass to the world, he said. For whatever reason, no such meeting happened. The rest of the world is in no way unfamiliar with America's ass. The rest of the world is, perhaps by nature of how asses work, far more familiar with America's ass than the average American is. So like it didn't surprise anyone, I don't think. He said for whatever reason no such meeting happened. Clooney held out hope that Democratic governors would address the matter with Biden instead. Put George Clooney in charge. Seems like he has some of the right ideas, but the readout he got on a White House meeting with the governors suggested that no one had stepped up and told the president the truth. Then on July 8th, Biden released a letter as a last-ditch effort to end the crusade to push him out. And like I said before, like Biden had to come out after that debate and be a lion. If he wanted to swing things around and be like, hey, I had a bad debate performance, but I was nervous. You know how it is. Players going to play, ball is going to ball is going to play, players going to ball, right? Like if he had been out there and spoke well, articulately, was engaging, was able to have impromptu, off the cuff conversations with people in the direct few weeks after that debate, people might have been able to look aside. But every speaking engagement he had post that debate was also terrible. Like he just couldn't pull out of the nosedive because they no longer could keep him away from people. Let's see. The letter shocked Clooney, despite the Herculean efforts that the Democratic machine had made to shut down any sort of real contest. Biden cast his position as that of a true exercise in democracy, having received over 14 million votes, 87% of the votes cast across the entire nominating process. This was a process open to anyone who wanted to run. Oh my God, I thought they meant the 2020. Primary, but they talking about like the fake 2024 primary they had. Was Lincoln Chafee in that one too? Come on. Between him and like RFK Jr., right? Only 3 people chose to challenge me. Of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Biden wrote that he fared so badly that he left the primaries to run as an independent. Of Dean Phillips, a Democratic congressman from Minnesota, the president said that he attacked me for being too old and was soundly defeated. Sounds like Dean Phillips, for all of his flaws, right about that, right? The voters of the Democratic Party had voted. They have chosen me to be the nominee of the party. This was too much for Clooney. He reached out to Obama to tell him that he was considering writing an op-ed to call for Biden to drop out. Obama advised that doing so would only make Biden dig in deeper. Yeah, great. This is this great system you have here, Brandon. Him, Brandon, not me, Brandon, obviously. Let's see. Yeah, so. In his home office in the south of France, Clooney sat down at his laptop. I love Joe Biden, Clooney wrote. It's so weird. As a senator, as a vice president, as a president, I consider him a friend and I believe in him, believe in his character, believe in his morals. In the last 4 years, he's won many of the battles he's faced. Joe Biden's a really bad person. And I mean, I know you have to glaze him up because of the kind of person he is, like Donald Trump, but like people got to stop having this revisionist history about Joe Biden. I knew it had gotten really bad when people called Joe Biden like the pathological liar and the serial plagiarist. They called him Honest Joe to be in dichotomy with like Trump, who is also a pathological liar. But Joe Biden is like a, known fabulist. And like, it's just a lesser evil politics, lesser of two evil politics. The political duopoly that we have which causes people to treat each party as though they act in like strict opposition to the other party across every issues, including just like personal flaws and issues. It's the death of people's ability to discern truth from fiction, because it just encourages like really faulty thinking like this. Thank you for the super chat from FT Yan. Let's go, Brandon. That's right. Let's go, Brandon. When I start to mentally decline, I will bow out, gracefully. Clooney got to the point, we are not going to win in November with this president. This is the opinion of every senator and Congress member and governor who I've spoken with in private. Cowards, a lot of them. Like, they let George Clooney come out and have to be like the hero of the story, which I guess he's probably used to, but still, it's disgusting how cowardly every member of our political establishment is, and is continuing to be. Even in this article, this article itself is cowardly. This article is all about how Clooney has like more courage than every journalist we have, which is insane. Let's see. Clooney sent a copy of to Jeffrey Katzenberger and told him to show one of Biden's closest advisors, Stephen Ricchetti. Ricchetti read it and was furious. Fuck him. What's he going to do? You were in Ocean's 11. What's he going to do? Hide an old man's mental decline from you? Like he even got shooters. He can't even cause Biden's synapses to shoot off. Internally, he threatened to shut Clooney down. He ain't gonna do shit, bro. Some of his colleagues thought he sounded like a mob boss. Word came back that Ricchetti suggested it would be better if Clooney held it a week. Yeah, exactly. So he was furious. I'm going to shut him down. I'm going to send shooters to his house. I got boys on the street to well, maybe if you can hold off. Yeah, yeah. You what, mate? Exactly. Like whole bitch made party. Exactly. You weren't going to do anything. If they had actually shut it down, that would have been like a sign of power. They couldn't do anything. Katzenberg did not agree with Clooney's assessment. Biden had been jet lagged. I've never been so jet lagged. I couldn't identify George Clooney. And Katzenberg had been told that the president didn't sleep well on flights because he's old. Old people like to be in their own bed, even in the bedroom aboard Air Force One. Damn. I guess I should go on Air Force One. It's pimping like that. So the president had got only 4 or 5 hours of sleep. Biden was one of those people who needed the full 8 hours every night. Even just 7 hours wouldn't cut it. Like, I'm sorry. Okay, I guess. Like, we would all like to sleep 8 hours a night. Although I sleep 9 hours a night, because when you are like really active like I am, you need more than 8 hours of sleep. But like, I can operate on 4 or 5 hours for sure. Like, even just 7 hours wouldn't cut it. Like, excuse the shit out of me. I guess you're the president, right? Maybe make the day longer. It's fucking ridiculous. Yes, Biden had gone into that disconcerting whisper mode among that one clutch. Katzenberg still didn't understand why he had done that, but what he had said was perfectly fine. Yes, it paled in comparison with Obama's eloquence and elegance, but that had always been the case. Damn, yeah. Okay. Let's see what. Now it's about a play that George Clooney is in. Let's see. Okay. Asked about the fundraiser and what followed, a Biden spokesperson said, no one has been able to point out where Joe Biden had to make a presidential decision or make a presidential address where he was unable to do his job because of mental decline. Okay. Sure. In fact, the evidence points to the opposite. He was a very effective president. Evidence of aging is not evidence of mental incapacity. Normally, I don't leave it on my audience to understand what's fucking ridiculous about some of the stuff that we hear, but I want you to think about like how ridiculous this actually is to say. Like, we don't know what decisions. I guess I'm going to say it. We don't know what decisions were impacted by his mental decline. We can't know that. We can know what decisions we don't agree with, what decisions had really negative what had really negative consequences. But you're right. We can't know which one of those were done just because Joe Biden fucking sucks, and which one of those are because he was demented. You got us there. You got us there. We are forever stuck in a game of evil or literally mentally incapacitated in American politics. Those are your two choices when it comes to American politicians: literally evil or mentally incapacitated to the point in which you cannot tell the difference. And those are the two political parties in America, and you get to decide which one is which. But at the Winter Garden Theater, one breezy April afternoon, Clooney said it was important to him and his team to include what he saw as misleading testimonials about Biden. "We had to do it," he said, "to underline the importance of speaking truth to power no matter which party currently rules." Also, he acknowledged, "Lies serve as an important reminder for anyone in the audience upset about the current state of affairs. Democrats deceived the country about Biden's abilities," and Clooney said, "That's how Trump won." Again, I think that's an oversimplified understanding of why Trump won. I think even if Biden had been cognitively fit, he had done everything the same. Like, because we don't know which decisions he made as a result of his mental decline. We can't point to any specific ones that he made, right? Besides his decision to run again, obviously, that's a big one. But other than that, we have a hard time understanding which ones were driven by ego, bad politics, or literal Swiss cheese brain. So I guess we just can't condemn, right? Let he whose brain is without holes in it throw the first stone, cast the first stone. I will say, though, just like I said, Kamala Harris didn't just lose because she's a black woman. Just like I said, she didn't just lose because she was a new face in a race that had already been tainted by Joe Biden. Joe Biden didn't just lose because of one bad debate and because his brain was Swiss cheese. I did say Americans are, to say that Americans would vote for Joe Biden despite that would be a little cynical. But I would say, honestly, if his presidency had uplifted people in a more hard to deny way, in a way that was more readily appreciable all across the country and not like reliant on cherry picking a few data points that may or may not have impacted you personally, and then also doing a genocide, then I think things would have turned out differently. I think that we can't, just completely, despite how vibes based our political media is, completely just abandon materialism, right? I think that, vibes are downstream from people's material circumstances. And so if people's material circumstances were good and hadn't seen a sharp decline, because a lot of people were left better off by nature of how the pandemic relief measures impacted their life. And then they felt a sharp decline when they were removed. And that was under Joe Biden. Had that stuff not happened, I think people would have probably ignored a lot of the mental stuff. They had already been ignoring it, right? The debate was bad, but people don't care so much about it as long as there's food in their bellies and they can reasonably expect there to be tomorrow. So we again, that's an unknown. The thing about American elections is that there are so many variables that go into how they are decided, from social to structural to just the bad ways in which we conduct them. It's not a day off from work, that there's there are infinite variables that you can point to that cause one party to lose or one party to win. And what you choose to highlight is usually just going to be a lens into your own personal political opinions. But you know mine, damn it. You know what I feel. But yeah, so that was this article. Kind of a letdown in my opinion. Grammatically likely to be perfect, right? Although I feel like they used sneaked when I would have said snuck, but that's probably me just being wrong. But I don't think that it's, like I said, it's people getting ready to throw Biden under the bus. But first of all, throwing Biden under the bus wouldn't even be real accountability. It would have just been the smart thing to do politically. So waiting until after the election has been ruined by Joe Biden, and far after it would have been smart to actually bring up these issues to start talking about this, is just a sign of the same negative incentives that led people to hide it in the first place. It's not a good thing, because this is just a sign that it was a craven decision to hide it. And now that it's not worth hiding anymore, everyone's coming out and writing their own version of how it happened by O.J. Simpson, and pointing the finger at every other person, right? When it's them, it's you. You're the villain of this story if you were just around him and didn't do anything, and it was your job to be in politics or media. You're the person who caused this. Joe Biden's a demented old man. He can't be responsible for himself. Like it just is what it is.